One of the biggest questions of the 2024 NFL offseason is what should the Chicago Bears do at their quarterback position? They have two really good options. The first option is to keep Justin Fields, trade away the first overall pick, and use those assets along with their other assets they already have to build a great team around Fields. The second option they have is to use the first overall pick to draft a quarterback, trade away Fields, and use that return plus all their assets to build around this first overall pick. But what should the Bears do? That's the question I'm going to try to answer in today's video. I'm going to analyze both options that the Chicago Bears could go down and determine which one I think is better and determine which one I think they will do. But before we get into the video, I want to take a quick second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. It really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel. We release multiple NFL-related videos every week. That's it. Now, let's get back to the video. So I want to look at the arguments for both options the Chicago Bears have. And let's start out with the option of keeping Justin Fields. And to best understand this option, we have to understand what Justin Fields looked like in 2023. So here are Justin Fields' 2023 stats. What you can tell is he did have career bests in a number of stats, including passing yards, yards per game, completion percentage, a career low in interceptions. So a solid season all around from Justin Fields. But his rushing stats were nowhere close to as good as they were in 2022. And he still only had a 5-8 record. Yes, an improvement from 3-12 the previous season, but still not a winning record and a Bears team that's still not quite getting to the point they want to be in their timeline. As well, at the end of the day, while these passing yards are an improvement, less than 200 passing yards a game still isn't that great for any quarterback, no matter how often they run the ball. Even looking at Lamar Jackson, when he was running the ball a lot, he was still more than clearing 200 yards per game. So Justin Fields still has a long way to go as a passer, though obviously he's very adept as a runner. And the question is that a lot of Bears fans will bring up, is the problem with Justin Fields him or the weapons? And a lot of the people that bet on Justin Fields and want the Bears to keep Justin Fields say the problem is more the weapons than it is Fields. And one of the biggest arguments for keeping Justin Fields is the uncertainty of drafting. So let's look at the highest drafted QB of the last 10 NFL drafts and see how they compare to Justin Fields. And let's start in 2023 with Bryce Young. Now, the Bears had the opportunity to draft Bryce Young last year. They had the first overall pick, which they traded away, which is the only reason they currently have the first overall pick here in 2024. And yes, Bryce Young still has more than enough time to prove that he can live up to the hype he had coming out of college. But at the end of the day, Bryce Young was not very good in year one, and I would take Justin Fields over Bryce Young if I were to have to choose today. In 2022, the top quarterback taken was Kenny Pickett. And again, I would much rather take Justin Fields. In fact, in my quarterback shuffle video released last week, I actually had Justin Fields going to the Pittsburgh Steelers and taking over as the starter for Kenny Pickett. And I think that's a very popular assumption of what's going to happen this offseason if the Bears move on from Justin Fields. So yeah, I think that Fields is better than Kenny Pickett too. In 2021, you had Trevor Lawrence. This was actually Justin Fields' draft year, and I still think that Trevor Lawrence is a better QB. He hasn't quite lived up to his otherworldly hype, but he's still a phenomenal quarterback. He's still very good, and I think he's still better than Justin Fields. In 2020, Joe Burrow. We don't need to talk about this anymore. Joe Burrow is obviously better than Justin Fields. Nobody's going to argue that. Moving on to 2019, we have Kyler Murray, and this one's actually a little bit tough. I think push come to shove, I would rather have Kyler Murray, but the question should be, would I rather have Kyler Murray and the assets you could get in return for Justin Fields, or would you rather have Justin Fields and the assets you could get in return for a first overall pick? And I'd probably rather have Fields and the assets in return for a first overall pick. So while I prefer Kyler Murray, I think I'd keep Fields if I knew that the number one overall pick would turn into a Kyler Murray type player. On to 2018, we have Baker Mayfield, and I think this is a very similar situation to Kyler Murray. I think Baker's a slight bit worse and might actually be lower ranked than Justin Fields, but once you take into account what you are trading away and what the return on those assets would be, yeah, I'd keep Fields and trade away a Baker Mayfield type going first overall, 100%. 2017, we got Mitch Trubisky, and ask any Bears fan. It's Fields, not Trubisky. Then on to 2016, we have Jared Goff. Now, yes, Jared Goff is no longer with the Rams. They ended up moving on from him and winning a Super Bowl without him, but he still made an NFC championship in 2023. He still made it to a Super Bowl with the Rams. I would rather have Jared Goff than Justin Fields. Yes, he's not as elite as a Joe Burrow, but he's still one of the best, highest drafted QBs in the last 10 years. Looking at 2015, we have Jameis Winston, and Winston's been a backup in the league for a number of years. Yeah, he had his moments, but I would still much rather have Fields than Winston. And 2014, it's Blake Bortles. This guy's not even in the league anymore. Yeah, I'd rather have Fields. And so if you look at this, there's only really 3 quarterbacks of these 10 years that I would prefer to take them over Justin Fields, those being Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, and Jared Goff. Every other one of these drafts, I would rather have Justin Fields than the top drafted QB. And so if you're in the pro Fields camp, obviously, why would you ever take this risk? A 3 in 10 chance, that is not good enough to move on from Justin Fields in order to get a worse quarterback and not get the massive return that you'd get for the first overall pick. So that's more or less it for the pro Justin Fields argument. It's very heavily based on him slowly improving, the team being able to use a ton of their assets to build around him, to put a really good team in front of him, and the uncertainty surrounding first overall picks and highly drafted QBs, which doesn't have the greatest success rate, at least in recent history. Now, let's look at our second option, the option to draft a QB. Now, I have Caleb Williams here because I think he is the most likely quarterback to go number 1 in this draft. But at the end of the day, this could also very easily be Drake May or Jaden Daniels. It could go any which way, so we're not going to argue it too much. But let's just say it's Caleb Williams for argument's sake. So let's look at Caleb Williams' stats. And Caleb Williams didn't have as good a year in 2023 as he had in 2022 when he won the Heisman. Most of his stats were down. The only thing he was better in was completion percentage and rushing touchdowns, the latter of which doesn't really matter to his game. But the main takeaway to get from these stats is that Caleb Williams is much more of a pass-first quarterback than Justin Fields is. Over 300 yards per game with barely over 10 rushing yards per game, 142 rush yards in 12 games. Yeah, he has a lot of rushing touchdowns, but that's primarily probably based on 1-yard runs from the goal line, not as much so based on running the football all across the field. Caleb Williams is much more of a pocket passer than Justin Fields is. And at the end of the day, pass-first quarterbacks tend to have better NFL careers. Look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes. He could run every bit as well as a guy like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, heck, maybe even Lamar Jackson, but he doesn't because he understands that his arm talent is so effective. And the same goes for someone like Josh Allen, who could run it to an extent of how Justin Fields did in 2022, and in fact did early in his career. But as he got older in his career, as he got better as a passer, he stopped running it as much and started throwing it more because, as all the best QBs know, being an elite passer is way more beneficial to your team than being an elite rusher. So that's an argument for going with a quarterback like a Caleb Williams or like a Drake May. Less so for Jaden Daniels, who's much more built like a Justin Fields in terms of how he runs and throws the ball. Another argument for the draft to QB camp, we got to go back to the argument we made actually for Justin Fields, looking at the quarterbacks that were the top drafted quarterbacks in the past 10 years. But what happens if we change the question? What happens if we say, who was the best highly drafted quarterback in these drafts and how do they compare to Justin Fields? Well, first, let's look at the 2023 draft. Yes, Bryce Young hasn't looked that great in his first year in the league, but CJ Stroud at number 2 overall was phenomenal. And I think everyone would absolutely want to have CJ Stroud over Justin Fields with what we saw from him in year 1 in Houston. Then let's look all the way back in 2018. Yeah, Baker Mayfield went first overall, but who went 7th overall? Josh Allen. And also at 32nd overall was Lamar Jackson. 2 phenomenal quarterbacks came out of the first round in this year's draft, and Josh Allen was not that far behind Baker Mayfield. And in fact, most teams had Josh Allen ranked ahead of Baker Mayfield. The Browns just went with who they thought was the best quarterback, Baker, who wasn't bad and isn't bad, but isn't anywhere close to Josh Allen. And then in 2017, yeah, Mitch Trubisky went 2nd overall, but who went 10th overall? Patrick Mahomes, easily the best quarterback in the NFL right now. And all of a sudden, you look at this list of quarterbacks, this looks a lot more attractive to go and take a first overall quarterback and take the best quarterback available. Because if you get the best quarterback available, which this list shows, chances are they are going to be better than Justin Fields. And furthermore, if you look at probably the 3 years where you can definitively say Justin Fields is better than these quarterbacks, those being Kenny Pickett in 2022, Jameis Winston in 2015, and Blake Bortles in 2014, if you start to analyze these classes, it actually looks a little bit different. Let's look at Kenny Pickett. He was not even the highest rated quarterback in that draft. That would have been Malik Willis, who didn't go into the 3rd round in the 2022 draft, which was known for being an absolutely pathetic quarterback class where nobody was anywhere close to first round graded. In 2014, it's a somewhat similar story. Yes, there were 3 first round quarterbacks, those being Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, and Teddy Bridgewater. But Johnny Manziel only went that high because of his college clout, and Teddy Bridgewater went in the last pick of the first round only because the Vikings traded up to get that additional year of the team option, not because he was first round graded. The only one who was first round graded was Blake Bortles, and at the end of the day, Bortles wasn't even considered to be that good a quarterback. In fact, the massively QB needy St. Louis Rams, who had the 2nd overall pick, didn't even take Bortles. They took offensive tackle Greg Robinson. Not saying that worked out either, but still, there was not a consensus this guy should be going first overall. The only one of these drafts that did have a potential first overall candidate quarterback was 2015. And yes, Jameis Winston went number 1 that year. Marcus Mariota went number 2. And I would rather have Justin Fields than both of those guys' careers. But the 2015 draft was the only class that didn't have a definitive, you take this guy number 1 quarterback, and also didn't have a top QB or a first round QB that ended up being better than Justin Fields. And when you look at this year's quarterback class, this is actually a very good quarterback class. There's a potential to have 3 quarterbacks go in the top 3 picks, which I believe would only be the 4th time in NFL history that this happens. This means that this quarterback class is actually one of the best quarterback classes we've seen in recent years, compared to like the 2022 draft class, which was absolutely pathetic. Combine these 3 guys with guys like Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy, and Bo Nix, and you have a potential to have only the 2nd time in history where 6 quarterbacks go in the first round. The only other time it happened was 1983, which had quarterbacks like Dan Marino, John Elway, and Jim Kelly all go in the first round. Pretty freaking good draft class. So if you're looking at recent years draft class that this class is comparable to, I think there's 3. And let's look at them. You have the 2021 draft class, which actually Justin Fields was a part of. This class had Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones. And honestly, Justin Fields is far and away the 2nd best player in this draft. He is way better than Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, and Trey Lance. That's not even an argument. But I don't think he's as good as Trevor Lawrence, and I think most people would agree with me there. But this is far and away the weakest in hindsight of those top-tier QB classes we've seen in recent years. Another one of these classes is the 2020 draft class, and oh my God, this draft class is absurd. You have Justin Herbert, stud. Joe Burrow, stud. Tua Tagovailoa, stud. Jordan Love, stud. Every single one of the first-round picks from this class is a stud. This is a phenomenal class, and if you got any of these quarterbacks, I think you'd take them over Justin Fields in a heartbeat. And then the 3rd quarterback class that can compete with this year's is the 2018 draft class. And that includes some really top-end talent in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, some mid-tier talent in a Baker Mayfield, and some absolutely terrible draft picks in Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold. But if you look at the 14 quarterbacks picked in the first round in these 3 drafts, I would say 7 are definitively better than Justin Fields. Those being Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. Then you have Justin Fields, who, is Justin Fields, and you have 6 quarterbacks that you could argue are worse than Justin Fields. Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Josh Rosen, and Sam Darnold are all definitively worse than Justin Fields, and Baker Mayfield's pretty close, but I'd accept an argument if you said Baker Mayfield was worse than Justin Fields, or you would rather have Justin Fields. So when you look at the 2024 quarterback class compared to other quarterback classes of a similar caliber, it starts to look a lot more attractive to take the best player available and have them take over as the starting QB from Justin Fields. Another argument in the draft a QB camp is who made the NFL playoffs as starting quarterbacks. And looking at this list, most of these guys I would say are definitively better than Justin Fields. Justin Fields, I think, is better than or equal to only 3 guys on this list. Baker Mayfield, who I've talked about many times, I think is quite comparable, but I would allow the argument of Fields being better than Baker. And then Joe Flacco, who is just towards the end of his career. Yeah, he was great this year, but I would rather have Fields. And Kenny Pickett, who we already talked about earlier, Justin Fields may well replace in Pittsburgh if the Bears do decide to move on from Fields. But outside of that, every one of these quarterbacks, I would say, is better than Fields. And Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco were knocked out in pretty big dominations in the first round. And Baker, yes, did win 1 playoff round, but only even made the playoffs because he was in an absolutely atrocious NFC South. Were he in any other division in football, the Buccaneers might not have even made the NFL playoffs, and we might have had another really good QB in his stead here on the list. And then the final argument that I can think of for the draft a QB camp is NFL contracts. What you have to understand is when you draft a first round pick, you get 4 years of entry-level contract wages and 1 year of a team option. That means that if the Chicago Bears go out and draft a quarterback in the first round, they're going to have 5 years of cost control, and 4 of those years are going to be quite low cost controlled for quarterbacks. Compare that to Justin Fields, who only has 1 year left on his rookie scale deal and his team option year. That is significantly worse than a first overall pick would be, and makes it a lot harder for the Chicago Bears to weaponize their cap space to build a really good team in all the other positions on the football field. And yes, you might argue that you can get Justin Fields for a decent deal, but let's look at recent quarterback deals for mid-tier quarterbacks, which Justin Fields probably is. You have Daniel Jones, who after 1 good year with the Giants begged 4 years, $160 million. Over $40 million a year. Absolutely absurd contract that he was able to get. Then you look at Geno Smith, who in the same offseason, the 2023 offseason, managed to bag a 3-year, over $100 million contract after being considered a bust for the vast majority of his career and only really having 1 good season to show for it in Seattle. So if you're the Bears and you keep Justin Fields, you are going to have to pay him massive money very soon to keep him around in Chicago. And that just makes it so much harder to build a good team around him. A rookie QB, you got a lot more time to be able to sign your current guys, sign free agents, and have those contracts expire by the time whomever you might draft in this draft is at the end of their rookie scale deal. So now we've seen the argument for why to keep Fields and trade away the first overall pick, and we've seen the argument for why to pick a quarterback with the first overall pick and trade away Fields. But the question now becomes, what option should the Chicago Bears do? And I think it comes down to 2 questions. And those questions are, can Fields win a Super Bowl? And are you willing to take risks? So let's analyze those questions. The first question, can Fields win a Super Bowl? This is obviously the most important question. There are plenty of quarterbacks who are starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL who really do not have the caliber or quality to win Super Bowls. And if you don't think that Justin Fields can win a Super Bowl, nothing else matters. You have to move on. If he can't win a Super Bowl, you need a quarterback who can. You are not in the NFL to finish in a playoff spot or to win a playoff game. The goal is to win Super Bowls. And if you don't have a team or you don't have players that can make that happen, move the fuck on. The second question is, are you willing to take risks? And this is because we've looked at the stats. There are definitely quarterbacks that are available in the first round of NFL drafts that are better than Justin Fields. I don't think anyone can deny that statement. The risk part is there's also a lot of quarterbacks who are worse than Justin Fields. And so if you move on from Fields and use this pick to take a top tier quarterback and they don't work out, that's a massive blow. But if they do work out, all of a sudden, you're one of the most competitive teams in the league right away. So you have to ask the question, are you willing to take that risk? So let's look at my answers to these questions. And in the question, can Fields win a Super Bowl? My answer is no. I honestly don't think Fields is of the caliber to win a Super Bowl. I think Fields falls into what I'll call the Andy Dalton zone. Now, Andy Dalton had a fine NFL career. He was a starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals for almost a decade. He made it to multiple playoffs, had multiple winning seasons there, and was a solid quarterback. But you never felt like the Cincinnati Bengals were ever competing for a Super Bowl. You felt like they could make the playoffs. Heck, they might even be able to win a playoff game. Andy Dalton never did, but they might have been able to if they had a little bit more luck. But you would have never expected them or never thought it even possible for the Bengals teams led by Andy Dalton to make it to a Super Bowl, let alone win a Super Bowl. In fact, it wasn't until they got rid of Andy Dalton, they finally bought him out and drafted Joe Burrow, that pretty quickly after that, they made it to a Super Bowl because it's a well-run organization, but they just didn't have the quality of quarterback play needed to make it to a Super Bowl. And I feel like this is the quality of player that Justin Fields is. He's absolutely an NFL starter. He absolutely deserves to have a starting job at the start of the 2024 season. But I don't see Justin Fields being a quarterback that can ever win a Super Bowl, at least what I've seen from him. Not being able to throw for more than 200 passing yards, when you have receiving options like DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney, like this is not a bad receiving core. I'm not saying it's elite, but it's not bad. And if you can't throw for more than 200 passing yards a game with that level of receiving core, I don't see you being able to win a championship, no matter how good a team you have around you. But let's take a step back. Let's say that you think the Chicago Bears can win a Super Bowl with Justin Fields. And I think the Bears legitimately do believe that Justin Fields is a caliber of quarterback who could win a Super Bowl with the right team around him. Then it comes down to, are you willing to take risks? And am I willing to take risks? Heck yeah, I am. You should absolutely take risks. At the end of the day, only 1 in 32 teams every year is able to win the Super Bowl. You have to take some calculated risks if you're going to become the best team in the league. You just have to. You can't be great by not taking some chances. And so if you're the Chicago Bears and you have the first overall pick and you have the right to draft a top tier QB, take it. Yeah, it might not work out. Yeah, it might mean your franchise sucks even more for a few more years. But at the end of the day, it's worth the risk to be one of the most competitive teams in the league for the next decade if you get this right. You want a perfect example of a team that took a massive risk and it paid off? Look no further than the 2017 NFL offseason. The Kansas City Chiefs had just come off a 12-4 season, winning the division, and had had winning records each of the last 4 seasons. 12-4, 11-5, 9-7, 11-5. This was a very good team that a lot of people thought was only a piece or two away from being a true Super Bowl contender. They had the 27th pick in that draft, and what do they do on draft day? They take that pick along with their 3rd round pick, along with next year's 1st round pick, to trade up to number 10 in order to draft a quarterback. A lot of people question this. They're like, you don't need a quarterback. Alex Smith is a fine quarterback. You just need to refine the edges of your team and you can win a Super Bowl with what you have. Andy Reid's a great coach. Alex Smith's a great quarterback. You have a great tight end in Travis Kelce and some really good defensive pieces. Why are you trying to fiddle and taking a quarterback? This makes no sense. And what happened the next season with Alex Smith still as their starter? They went 10-6 and they still won their division and they still look dominant. But that offseason, they traded away Alex Smith and put that 10th overall pick into the starting job. And I'm sure you all know who that is. That's right. It's Patrick Mahomes. And what did he go and do? Turn the Chiefs into a perennial Super Bowl favorite, not just contender, favorite. And they've won 3 Super Bowls in the 6 seasons since he took over as a starter. Yeah, that was a massive risk. You trade away 2 years worth of 1st round picks and a 3rd round pick to replace a guy who is already very good at quarterback in Alex Smith. But the Chiefs made the right call. Nobody would deny that. And they got 3 Super Bowls out of it. Who knows if they would have even been able to win 1 Super Bowl if they had stuck with Alex Smith, if he was good enough with the team that the Chiefs have put together around Patrick Mahomes to win Super Bowls. And this is why you have to be willing to take risks. Yes, You could absolutely wind up like the 49ers, who a year after making it to the Super Bowl traded away 3 years worth of first-round picks to move up and draft Trey Lance, who 2 years later they traded away for a fourth-round pick because they found a better quarterback in the last pick of the draft a year later. But still, you never know when that's going to happen. You got to take risks. You got to play the game, because if you don't take risks, if you don't play the game, you're not going to ever win. Scared money don't make money. But that's it for the video. Let me know what you think the Chicago Bears should do with this pick. I think they're going to trade it away, but I'd love to hear your comments, and I'd love to have a discussion with you. But we'll see y'all next time. Peace!